pork. Is cruelty to pigs the price we have to pay for ham sandwiches? Or is there another way? Is imported pork reared on a diet of artificial hormones and powerful antibiotics? And do the nitrites in ham and bacon cause stomach cancer? What's really in our pork? We eat a lot of pork each year, about 63,000 tonnes of it. That's over 700,000 of these, piggies. But in recent years, pork has suffered a bit of a bad reputation, mostly due to publicity about conditions in our piggeries. I'm going to find out more about those later, but first, what's good about pork? Just like any other kind of meat, pork is an excellent source of high-quality protein. It contains a lot of vitamin B1 and useful amounts of selenium, along with other beneficial vitamins and minerals. In the 1980s, America's National Pork Board began marketing pork as a white meat, as red meat had been linked to heart disease and cancer.
Pork, the other white meat.
But was the advertising actually one big porky pie? Well, iron is what makes red meat red, and pork has less than either beef or lamb and about the same as chicken. So, using this criterion, it seems that pork really is white meat. Fresh pork only has one ingredient, but the most popular pork products, ham and bacon, have a surprising number of added ingredients. Some hams are only a little over half actual pork. Meat can be replaced by fillers like soy or potato starch. But the second ingredient in most hams and many bacons is this: water. Water is added to bacon and ham as a result of the curing process, but some evaporates during secondary processing, for instance if the bacon is smoked. So just how much water are we paying for? Turns out that manufacturers are under no legal obligation to tell us, so we sent an assortment of bacon to the lab. The least was in Hutton's at 57%, whereas almost 71% of the Heller's bacon was water. This may seem surprisingly high, but actually a fresh leg of pork is around 76% water. After water, the next most common ingredient in ham and bacon is a preservative. It's laden with the stuff, but don't be scared, it's only salt. To demonstrate why this one simple ingredient has been used to preserve meat for hundreds of years, we've given food scientist Owen Young 2 legs of pork. He'll leave one untreated, but soak the other in brine for 5 days to salt cure it.
So our 5 days are up. We're going to take our salted leg of pork out, and you can see it's changed a lot of colour here. And we're going to now hang this one for 2 weeks, along with the unsalted one in the cool room. So our 2 weeks are up, and we've got our 2 legs of pork here. We've got our salted one, which is over here. That smells okay. This guy, it's rank. It really is rank. Okay, so here's our UV light. Now this will show up bugs that actually fluoresce. You can see this sort of yellowy stuff. These are pseudomonids. They fluoresce quite nicely. There's other orange stuff you can see from time to time, black stuff. Look, overall though, this is a mess.
We also sent swabs off to the lab for more scientific analysis. The swab from the untreated pork had a whopping 4 million bacteria on it, compared to just 5,600 on the salted pork. So salt is a fantastic preservative, but unfortunately the sodium it contains can cause high blood pressure and heart disease. And because of the curing process, ham contains around 16 times as much, and bacon more than 12 times as much as uncured pork. So eat both in moderation to look after your heart. We're used to seeing cows and sheep in the paddocks, but where exactly are all the pigs we're eating? Conventional farms can be indoor, outdoor or a mix, largely depending on the local environment. 59% are indoor. It's easier to control temperature. Sam McIver of New Zealand Pork has agreed to show me around a typical farm. Life for pigs differs from farm to farm. In most conventional ones, it begins in one of these, a farrowing crate.
The whole design here is about keeping the sow from rolling on the piglets. The aim for the pig farmer is to grow as many pigs as they possibly can, and obviously they don't want pigs dying.
Around 60% of all sows in New Zealand are confined in farrowing crates for up to 5 weeks until their piglets are weaned. Farrowing crates roughly halve the number of piglet deaths during weaning, but the mortality rate is still around 12%. The SPCA wants them banned, saying restricting a pig's movement for long periods can lead to demented behaviour. New Zealand Pork says they're looking to make improvements, but there are no plans to phase them out. So you're a parent, I'm a parent. Does anything about this operation strike you as perhaps a little bit cruel?
Absolutely not. These sows are very happy. They're doing what they naturally do, which is they eat and they lie down and feed their pigs.
So what does life hold in store for the piglets once they're weaned? Well, as opposed to their mothers, which breed until they're about 4 years old, most piglets live for around 4 months before slaughter. Some are raised in eco-barns where they're relatively free to roam, and some will be finished off in concrete pens like these. What do you think of the way things are here for them?
They're good. I mean, these pigs, you can see they're very, very healthy. They're growing well, and it is about providing a good environment for the animal to grow, and to make efficient use of your feed, etc, etc. If the farmer goes out of business, then nobody's won out of that situation.
Coming up, I'll investigate the most controversial pig farming practice.
It's against our animal welfare legislation.
And what to look out for if you want to buy pork made from free-roaming pigs. I've found out around 60% of sows in New Zealand are confined in farrowing crates for up to 5 weeks at a time, a practice the SPCA wants banned. Around 35% of sows will also spend some or all of their 4-month pregnancy in what's known as a gestation or sow stall. This is by far the most controversial aspect of indoor pig farming. But when we asked to film sow stalls in action, a New Zealand Pork representative explained that pig farmers had been burnt by recent publicity and were unlikely to let our cameras in. However, we did manage to find a disused piggery which reveals the conditions some pigs are raised in on intensive pig farms. It's almost upsetting being in here. There would be more than 200 pigs in here and the noise was deafening. You wouldn't come in here without earmuffs. But the most upsetting part of it for me, and I wasn't prepared for feeling the way I am, but is right here where I'm standing, and I'm standing in a sow stall. When a pig was pregnant, she would come here, she'd spend the duration of her pregnancy right here in this very small space. Food down one running trough at the end and waste matter just going into the grate where I'm standing. Some sows are continually moved between sow stall, farrowing crate and mating facility. They can live almost their whole lives in confinement so extreme they are unable to turn around. But this is already changing, and by next year farmers will only be allowed to use sow stalls for 4 weeks of the sow's pregnancy. And in 2015 we'll join other world leaders, the UK, Sweden and Finland, by banning them altogether. Why do you think it's a good idea to phase them out?
I think it is about responding to consumer needs. And the other thing too is that farmers are now confident that there are new options out there that they can use and still maintain pregnancies, prevent losses, still be able to look after their sows well.
No sow stalls are used at this farm. They are experimenting with what's known as group housing.
With these systems we are learning things, and that takes time. There is a cost associated with the changeover, and that takes time for farmers as well.
For me, this is a huge improvement on intensive farming, and there are farms which some consider more humane still. Only a minuscule 1% of New Zealand pork is truly free range. That means both the breeding sows and the piglets destined for our tables can run around outside. The Harmony pork brand, some smaller producers and all certified organic farmers fall into this category. So if that's free range pork, how does FreeFarmed pork differ? Freedom Farms branded pork is produced from piglets born on free-range breeding farms and finished in eco-barns. They call this FreeFarmed.
Free farming and free-range farming, for us it's irrelevant. The point is we're looking for a product that can be guaranteed to be farmed without cruelty and the animals can display their natural behavioural patterns.
But why is it so much more expensive to bring home the free-farmed or free-range bacon? When we checked the local supermarket, Harmony and Freedom Farm bacon were significantly dearer than conventionally farmed products.
The extra costs come about from having to have straw, having to have more land. The productivity isn't as great. The animals, when they run around and move, don't put on the same amount of weight for the same amount of feed, etc. But the reality is consumers will pay it.
The SPCA supports free-range pig farms, but free-farmed pork farms like this one also get the SPCA blue tick.
So Robin, tell me what we're seeing here. Well, this is what you won't see in intensive farming. The piglets are actually free to roam, the mums are together, sometimes they have them singly, and the piglets can chase after them, bit of milk on the run. Yeah. You can see here that there are a lot of sows over this area, but nobody's interfering with anybody else, and there's no aggression that's being shown.
These proud mums have just given birth in their huts. On intensive farms, they'd be in the indoor farrowing crates I saw earlier.
It's horrible, and industry says that they can't find an alternative. Well, this is the alternative.
It is true that more piglets are squashed on free-range farms, but according to the SPCA, these pigs are free to exhibit natural behaviour in a way that's impossible on an intensive farm. The SPCA is one of several animal welfare groups calling for farrowing crates, along with sow stalls, to be banned on the grounds of cruelty.
And the thing that is the most shocking is that it's actually against our animal welfare legislation, and that pig farming had to get a dispensation to be able to do that. And the dispensation was principally about money.
As a consumer, it's very hard to know whether most pork has been farmed in a way you're comfortable with. Maybe you're fine with this, but not this. Fine with this, but not this. Unfortunately, most labelling won't tell you exactly how your pork was farmed. There are brands that now display New Zealand Pork's Pig Care label, but some are critical.
Basically, it's really unhelpful because all it means is that the product meets minimum requirements under the Animal Welfare Code, which still allows pigs to be kept in sow stalls or farrowing crates.
In fact, currently the only way to be certain pork has been farmed without farrowing crates or sow stalls is to opt for one of the few New Zealand brands displaying organic certification or the SPCA's blue tick. However, New Zealand Pork says buying Pig Care label pork supports the tremendous strides this country is making with pig welfare, something that can't be guaranteed when buying imported pork. Nearly 45% of the pork we eat, around 30,000 tonnes a year, is imported. So how is this farmed? Well, we import over 80% of our pork from Canada, Australia, the United States and Denmark, all of which allow the use of sow stalls. Some of us might want to vote with our wallets and avoid pork from these countries, but there's a snag.
A New Zealand brand isn't a guarantee that you're buying New Zealand pork. Some products will say made from local and imported ingredients, so that's a pretty meaningless claim.
You could be eating Danish pork preserved with New Zealand salt.
Consumer would like to see mandatory country of origin labelling on all single ingredient foods. So for example, fish, meat, such as pork.
This time, consumer and the pork industry see eye to eye.
We know country of origin labelling is an issue for consumers, so way over 90% of consumers want to know where their meat is coming from. So we think it's absolutely about being transparent and giving consumers the choice.
After the break, I'll investigate if free-roaming pigs make for better tasting pork.
This one here was definitely more juicy.
And could eating too much ham give you stomach cancer? I found out much of the pork we eat is produced using sow stalls and farrowing crates, which keep sows in conditions which many feel are cruel. Free-range and free-farmed pork, on the other hand, are SPCA approved. But does a free-roaming pig make for better tasting pork? I'm going to find out. We had a chef prepare and cook several conventionally produced and free-farmed pork chops the same way. So which will a bunch of meat-loving boxers prefer? The red pork on the left is conventionally produced, while the yellow pork on the right is free-farmed.
This one here was definitely more juicy.
Of the red tray. I felt the red tray was better.
I slightly preferred the yellow. No, it's the red one.
So our boxers awarded a narrow points victory to the conventionally farmed pork. Although they clearly found little difference between the two in terms of taste, is there a difference in terms of their nutritional value? Well, lab testing revealed both types had very similar protein, water, salt and energy content. However it's farmed, one concern many have about pork is fat. I'm on the hunt for some knowledgeable meat eaters. I have loins of beef, pork and lamb, but which is the fattiest? Beef, pork or lamb?
So the beef.
Pork probably still the fattiest.
Why? Why pork?
I suppose it's just the way the animal is fattened up.
Pork?
Pork. Probably the pork.
You think pork?
Yeah.
Why's that?
So much fat on it.
The leanest cut is the pork, and then the beef, the lamb is the fattiest. You surprised?
Yes.
Lamb is the fattiest.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought pork was the most fattiest. Wow, that's great. That's because I love pork. I never knew that.
Didn't expect that one.
You're obviously surprised?
Yeah.
Is it going to change the way you eat?
No.
A lean pork loin chop actually has less fat than similar cuts of beef and lamb. That said, the fat content of pork depends a lot on the cut. Trim pork is very low in fat, streaky bacon is certainly not. We've become so far removed from the farm, how many of us even know where our meat comes from? Piggy Sam here is going to help me find out. We've got 5 cuts of pork: fillet, chops, mince, ham and bacon. Where do you think your pork comes from? Stick them on.
Mince. I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'll pop it there.
Ham roll's probably going to come from his leg.
A fillet.
In fact, overall, most people we asked made a right pig's ear of it. Do you eat a lot of pork?
No.
No, okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, because you've got them all wrong. The mince is usually from around here. The pork chop, round the back. Well, bacon goes right here. Sandwich ham, right here. And then the fillet on the side. So I guess we don't know that much when it comes to pork. Do you sort of know about where meat comes from?
Oh, well, roughly, but no, probably not as well as I should, no.
And to complicate this question further, some cuts of meat are likely to come from specific varieties of pig. Bacon pigs, for example, have been bred to be tubbier for more succulent, fatty meat, whereas pigs bred for trim pork are far, well, trimmer. But purpose breeding isn't the only way to produce leaner meat. Farmers in some countries add hormones. About 20% of all the pork we eat comes from Australia, and around a third of this is produced using the growth hormone PST. Pigs raised using PST yield more meat, which is less fatty. Although it's licensed in New Zealand, our farmers have voluntarily decided not to use it. So, should we be concerned about PST in pork imported from Aussie? I've hopped the ditch to find out.
It has a 0 withholding period. That means you can inject it and you can take the pig directly to slaughter. There is absolutely no health consequences.
See, when I hear the word hormones, I'm thinking of things like testosterone and estrogen. Is that the kind of hormones we're talking about here?
PST is not like that. It is not a steroid hormone at all. It's derived from a natural protein that occurs in the animal, has no effect on humans.
We checked this out with the World Health Organization and it's true. Only minute quantities of PST are used, and because it's a protein, any that makes it into your stomach would be digested along with the meat. But there's another kind of growth promoter that's even more controversial. Over half the pork we import comes from the USA and Canada. Intensively farmed pigs in both countries can be reared on a constant diet of antibiotics to promote weight gain. Antibiotics are not used to increase meat yield in New Zealand or Australia, but Aussie pigs may be fed a constant diet of antibiotics to prevent disease.
So it really does depend on the individual farm, on the disease problems that they've got. But there are cases where, there will be quite continuous use of antibiotics in difficult situations. There are other cases where there'll be very, very low volumes used.
But many experts say the amount of antibiotics currently used in farming could have devastating consequences.
When you use antibiotics, resistance can develop, and the more you use, the more resistance that develops. We all have bacteria that sometimes make us sick, and we have antibiotics or drugs that kill them. The problem with resistance, it means that that bug is no longer killed by the drug we're using, the antibiotic. It's sort of like they put on a bulletproof vest so that the antibiotics that worked before no longer work.
proper cooking will kill superbugs, but they can spread from fresh meat. At the moment, New Zealand and Australian pork are not believed to contain superbugs, but this is far from true internationally.
We know around the world from various foods that are sampled in Canada, the US, but particularly in developing countries, that huge percentages of the food has superbugs in it. So we need to make sure that if any of those foods are ever imported, they are either inactivated by appropriate cooking and storage and/or are tested to make sure they don't have superbugs in them.
Until very recently, almost all pork imported into New Zealand had to be cooked or cured, which would kill antibiotic-resistant superbugs. But the government has just announced its intention to allow fresh pork imports, and MAF told us it's of the view that
the most appropriate way to manage the risk of antimicrobial resistance is through appropriate application and control of antibiotics use in the country of origin.
So there are no plans to test pork imports for superbugs at the border.
At the moment, we have a head in the sand view. If we don't look, we don't know, therefore there's not a problem.
Nitrite, aka E250, is found in most ham and bacon products. It protects us against food poisoning and also makes pork look pinker. Many people are concerned that nitrites could cause stomach cancer. MAF Food Safety says there is not enough data to draw firm conclusions, but they're not convinced there is a link. They've set the safe daily intake of nitrite for an average 70 kilogram adult at 5 milligrams per day. That means you'd have to eat 25 kilos of ham to exceed the limit. If you're still concerned, research suggests vitamin C prevents nitrites from becoming carcinogenic, so throw some tomato into your bacon sandwich. Or better yet, you could opt for a bacon that's nitrite-free. Unfortunately, if you're a ham lover, there's no such option. Removing the nitrites would mean a big reduction in shelf life. So what have I learned? Well, pork can be a great low-fat source of protein, and I don't have to worry about nitrites in ham and bacon as much as I thought. If I buy New Zealand pork, I know it's free of superbugs and hormones. But I was genuinely shocked by the conditions some pigs live in on intensive farms. So I guess in the end, it's a choice between my heart and my wallet. I'm definitely more comfortable with SPCA-approved pork. So I'm going with my heart.